On a remote island near the North Pole, the Norwegians are building an international seed bank inside a frozen Arctic mountain. The aim is to safeguard agriculture from a global catastrophe, such as nuclear war, an asteroid strike, and climate change. It's called the Doomsday Vault.
Svalbard, a group of islands run by the Norwegians just 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole. They're remote, cold, pristine. In one of these sandstone mountains, the Norwegians are building the seed bank. But it will be the Global Crop Diversity Trust, run by Carrie Fowler, that will maintain it forevermore.
A lot of people today are concerned about extinction. And we're going to end that process of extinction of agricultural crop varieties because we will have a safety backup and it's going to be in a safe place.
The plan for the Doomsday Vault was inspired in part by a seed bank in a coal mine on Svalbard.
You're going into mine 3. There's a shaft of this mine that contains the Nordic Gene Bank backup collection, which they put here in 1984.
Now we proceed into the next door, and then we have the door into the gene bank just in front of us.
It's also an experiment, what they call a 100-year experiment. They're testing the germination rate of the seeds here under permafrost conditions.
Only key in the world.
We have no mechanical refrigeration in this Nordic collection here, and the seeds have been just fine since 1984.
Peas.
More peas.
More peas.
This experiment is what enables us to know that the seed vault will be working quite well for decades, even if the mechanical refrigeration in the seed vault goes off.
The Doomsday Vault is sited just 2 kilometers from Longyearbyen, the main town on Svalbard. Even at midnight in the summer, it's light, the streets deserted. The Norwegian government wanted to establish the seed vault because it is worried about the risk of extinction of the world's major crops.
Seeds is such an important part of the human heritage. We cannot allow seeds to be destroyed.
Most people are happy to rely on just a few major crops, such as rice or wheat, for their food. For some scientists, however, that's dangerous.
All of the wheat that they see in the field, in a particular field, is typically going to be the same and uniformly vulnerable to any new pest or disease that might come along. And there is, in fact, one coming along for wheat, a wheat stem rust virus, which is actually was the cause of plagues that are mentioned in the Bible. This is a terrible, terrible disease that a new variant of which has started in Uganda and it's working its way around the world. Well, maybe one of the varieties that we lost 5 or 10 years ago was precisely the variety that could confer resistance to that disease now.
On April the 28, 2007, the Norwegians began digging the Doomsday Vault in earnest.
We are building 3 vaults inside the mountains here in the permafrost, where the seeds are going to be stored. And then we have a tunnel, and we have a building in front, and we have a working space or a working area inside the mountains here.
4,000 kilometers south of Svalbard in Holland is one of 1,000 seed banks around the world sending backup seeds to the Doomsday Vault. It's run by Dr. Bert Visser.
A seed bank is literally what it says. It's a store of many seeds, like a bank that holds a lot of money. The idea is also that it stores many different seeds, as many diverse seeds as possible.
It's 1 month into the building programme, and already the Norwegian tunnellers have created the entrance to the vault, covering the sides to protect against rockfalls. For many experts, it can't be built too soon.
The seed banks, as we know them worldwide, are not all maintained in the same fashion. Some of them are maintained quite well, and others are not maintained so well, for the simple reason that the gene bank managers that have to take care of the seeds simply have no access to the proper financial resources.
The Russians built the world's first seed bank, and like many others, it has suffered setbacks. Nikolai Vavilov amassed a huge collection of seeds, which survived the siege of Leningrad in 1942. But today the building is dilapidated, the seeds deteriorating. And it's not the only seed bank in trouble. There are 1,400 crop repositories around the world, not all sending seeds to Svalbard.
Over half of the seed banks that have reported on the status of their collections to FAO have said that they have an increased number of seeds that are losing the ability to germinate in their seed banks. In other words, they're dying. Many of the seed banks in developing countries, for example, have collections which they estimate are 50% endangered. We're having a mass extinction of diversity in agricultural crops that is on the scale of the dinosaurs dying out. It's a huge mass extinction which is under the radar screens of most people and even under the radar screens of the press and the media.
Longyear Bayern was established by the American coal magnate John Longyear in 1906. It is the world's northernmost town with over 1,000 people.
And there is a lot of history along these walls.
Tora Hultgren runs the museum in the Svalbard Science Centre. She can take us on a journey through time going back almost 400 years.
But here we are standing outside the display of archaeological finds from the whaling period. The whaling was started by English people from Yorkshire, from Hull and Whitby, as early as in 1611. At first they didn't get so many whales, but in 1613 they made a really good catch. And they go back to England with 130 big barrels with oil. As always, when the English succeeded, the Dutch followed. At the end of the 17th century, the Dutch whalers had hunted the whale almost to extinction.
The hope here is that in Svalbard, seeds will be saved from extinction. It would change the checkered history of the island. Svalbard is milder than similar places in the Arctic. It's warmed by the northern arm of the Gulf Stream. But in winter, the temperature drops to -16 degrees centigrade. For much of the time, it's bathed in a beautiful blue light.
They had no special clothes for this area, and that's remarkable, because sometimes in the graves we found that they have put 2 jackets on, 2 trousers, and even 3 layers of stockings. And a closer look on this shows that it had been repaired many times. I see it like this, that this person wearing this jacket has been a lot of seasons here on Svalbard. He has used the same clothes for several years.
4 months into building the Doomsday Vault, the 120-metre tunnel burrowed into the mountain is complete. The 3 vaults at the end are big enough to hold over 4 million seeds.
From start to finish, it's 7-8 months. So it's a very short building period.
The vault rooms will be at the end of a very long tunnel. The rooms themselves are about 25 meters long, about 13 meters wide, 5 meters high. It's actually, in a way, appropriate technology.
The cooling inside the rocks will spread over to number 1 and 3.
It's a small is beautiful idea. The facility itself is extremely simple.
In effect, a seed bank is a cross between a filing cabinet and a giant freezer.
The vault itself is going to be mechanically cooled down to about minus 18 to 20. This is number 3. And if that mechanized cooling fails, we're going to have months, indeed years, to get the repairmen out. Well, as you're coming down the tunnel there, the experimental data for a crop like sorghum is that the seed can be frozen at minus 20 for about 19,000 years. So some seed will last a long, long time. If you're really thinking long term, then you don't want to depend completely on human beings and mechanical systems. And Svalbard, inside the mountain, is a permafrost situation. It's minus 6. So the worst case projections for climate change in Svalbard is that we still have frozen seed there 200 years from now.
There have been several measures in the design of the seed vault taking care of possible climate change. One of them is that the seed vault is constructed fairly well above sea level, so that sea level increases will not harm the site. Another one is that the seed vault is created so far inside the mountain that it's the coolest place, in fact, in the mountain.
Yeah.
5 months into the build, and the seed vaults are taking shape.
We have some of the packets that we're going to use for storing seeds in this vault. We developed this with this company in the UK, and we got some prototypes of it, some examples, and we sent it out to a bunch of seed banks around the world for testing. Our friends at the big seed bank in the United States did what they called the stomp test on it, which was they put seeds in there, sealed it up, put it on the floor, and stomped on it. And that was to see if it would lose the tightness, you know, if any of the seeds would come through, if they would be punctured, but they think it's great. And we're sending them out to seed banks all over the world, and they're using them. In fact, in a fairly short time, we'll have probably 1.5 million of these packages filled with seeds in this vault.
Meanwhile, down south in Holland, Dr. Bert Visser and his crew are preparing seeds to be sent to Svalbard. Their seed bank is part of Wageningen University. It's sited right next to the Rhine River, and holds the seeds of vegetables such as broccoli and potatoes.
From here, from the Center for Genetic Resources, we will send about 18,000 samples of seeds to Svalbard, which is more or less 80% of our total collections. We've got good reasons to send our seeds to Svalbard. Of course, we've got nice facilities here, but this facility is very close to the River Rhine. We don't know what will happen in the future, what the chances are for the River Rhine to flood this area. We might have problems with fire or whatever. This place is a relatively safe place, but other places in the world have much more risks.
The effort to get countries to send their seeds to an international seed vault has been fraught with difficulties and taken years to accomplish. Many nations don't want to give up control over their crops.
There have been fights over access and ownership and control to crops and crop diversities going back at least 500 years. What we have here in the seed vault, though, is really a more collective effort of humanity, of all the different countries in the world, to come together and place their seed samples here.
Those countries, though, are not giving away their seeds. The Doomsday Vault is a bit like a safety deposit box.
They'll retain ownership over those seed samples. This is not a Norwegian facility with a bunch of Norwegian seeds in it. The seeds will still be owned by the different countries in the world, but now we have a treaty that mandates what they call facilitated access, and so countries of the world are going to be providing seeds to each other. We're going to be sharing seeds, so in effect we're going to treat these seeds here as a common heritage.
The island itself is so remote, only the coast is accessible by sea. Travelling inland is difficult. There are no roads. It would be easy to hide the vault.
We decided not to keep this a secret. One decided to do exactly the opposite. Make this a well-known facility so people can see it when they go on hiking trips. They see it when they go to the airport. We like to think that the community will guard it. It's part of the Longyearbyen community.
At the end of the tunnel, a curved wall would reflect a blast wave from an explosion, thus protecting the vaults. The care taken in preparing the Doomsday Vault echoes that of the nuclear bunkers people built for themselves in the 1950s. At the height of the Cold War, people wanted protection from a nuclear bomb.
We are living in a world where a lot of negative is happening. Terrorism, possibility of nuclear wars.
Problem is the resources are under constant threat from disasters, from wars.
If there is a real catastrophe at either a regional or a global level, we will be happy to have the seed vault, I believe. In this world today, it seems that people want guarantees. If you tell them that you're building a seed vault to protect seeds for hundreds or thousands of years, they want a guarantee, and there are no guarantees. There's no such thing as a guarantee of safety. And someone once asked me, well, what happens if a nuclear bomb drops on the mountain? Will the seeds be safe? I thought about it. I thought, well, first of all, we're not a target. Another answer to it would be, well, gosh, I guess it depends on how big the bomb is.
We are spending approximately £4 million from Norwegian public money on this. No place on in the world is, of course, 100% safe, but if there is one place which is 99.99% safe, it would be the permafrost here.
Norway is footing the bill for building the Doomsday Vault, but the Global Crop Diversity Trust is responsible for maintaining it. It'll cost them $120,000 a year.
This is the world's cheapest insurance policy. There are art museums, and they're going to spend a lot more money this year on protecting those art collections than we're going to spend on protecting the biological foundation of agriculture.
Finally, the shelving to hold the seeds is installed. All that remains is for the seeds to arrive.
If we had had this seed vault 10 years ago, we would have used it 5 times already. And we would have diversity in the world today alive that is presently extinct.
And we've also seen certain national or local gene banks being destroyed by wars like in Iraq or by typhoons like I think in the Philippines. But we hope this will stand whatever happens.
You can read in the media every day stories about people's concerns that some animal or some other plant may be about to become extinct. But we've had many different crop varieties in the last decade that have become extinct. And in the next decade, the same thing is going to happen. But the seed vault here, in a large part, is going to put a stop to that.
Whether the Doomsday Vault will succeed in its aim of preserving biodiversity, only time will tell. The Instituto de Salud del Niño is the largest public hospital for children in Lima, Peru. It's a center for children's health studies. Here, medical researchers believe they've identified a link between rising temperature and a life-threatening condition. Mrs. Escarcena has brought her baby girl Maria to the emergency room because of high fever and severe diarrhea. Diarrhea is a leading killer of children in the developing world. Most of the diarrhea cases end up in the oral rehydration unit for treatment. A patient's dehydration status is quickly evaluated. Baby Maria was severely dehydrated by her diarrhea and needed intravenous therapy to survive. In the many shanty towns of Lima, there is poor hygiene and limited access to water. It is easy for children to get diarrhea. The summer heat helps bacteria to grow. More bacteria, more diarrhea cases. What if temperatures were driven even higher by global warming? What would be the health impact?
Colabora muy bien con el examen. Muy bien, échate para acá, échate.
Whenever Lima experiences an El Niño weather phenomenon, it can drive temperatures up by as much as 5 degrees Celsius. El Niño is a reoccurring atmospheric and oceanic event that makes an appearance every 3 to 4 years. It starts with the Pacific Ocean warming up in the area of Indonesia around Sumatra and Java. When an El Niño arrives in Lima, the oral rehydration unit becomes overwhelmed with young patients. It was this observation that led a research team to calculate how El Niño-related temperature increases affected diarrhea cases. In the 1997 El Niño event, temperatures were as much as 5 degrees higher than normal, as shown by the red line. And the number of children admitted to hospital was up by as much as 200%. The Lima study makes clear the link between rising heat and increased childhood diarrhea. But how good is the El Niño weather phenomenon as a window into the future? The Four Corners region of the United States includes Arizona, Colorado, Utah, and New Mexico. Researchers are studying other diseases to find out if changes in weather patterns such as El Niño could be the cause. El Niño produces more rainfall in this area. More rainfall, more vegetation. Some scientists think this vegetation might be responsible for spreading a deadly disease. Is this another example of how changes in temperature are leading to changes in the pattern of ill health? Hantavirus is a rare but potentially deadly disease caused by a virus that lives in deer mice. Since it was discovered in the American Southwest in 1993, there have been 76 cases and 31 deaths in New Mexico. Nationally, 35% of all 465 reported cases have resulted in death. There were moderate and strong El Niño events in the 1990s and 2002-3. The peaks in the number of cases of hantavirus generally followed these years after an increase in the vegetation. More vegetation, more deer mice. Intuitively then, more infections of hantavirus. But the linkage between deer mice, the environment, and humans is not so simple. Some scientists even wonder if using El Niño as an analogue to anticipate public health problems due to global warming is such a good idea after all. Surprisingly, it may be an animal disease which gives the clearest indication that climate change could alter the pattern and distribution of disease. When blue tongue was confirmed at Belham House Farm, authorities immediately quarantined the area. The outbreak could have a devastating effect on the cattle and sheep industry of the United Kingdom. It's a painful and deadly disease for the animals. These sheep were infected in Belgium. Blue tongue is not transmittable to humans. But climate change brings not only warmth, but extreme heat. In the 2003 European heatwave, over 70,000 people died. In Paris, health facilities were overwhelmed. The IPCC say overall the negative effects of climate change outweigh the positives. But how do we respond to a threat we don't yet fully understand? Some experts argue caution should be taken when making predictions about its effect on our future health. The overwhelming evidence is that climate change will have a major impact on human health. The question for health authorities is what will be the precise impact and therefore how best to target our healthcare resources.
On a remote island near the North Pole, the Norwegians are building an international seed bank inside a frozen Arctic mountain. The aim is to safeguard agriculture from a global catastrophe, such as nuclear war, an asteroid strike, and climate change. It's called the Doomsday Vault.
Svalbard, a group of islands run by the Norwegians just 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole.
A new variant of which has started in Uganda and it's working its way around the world. Well, maybe one of the varieties that we lost 5 or 10 years ago was precisely the variety that could confer resistance to that disease now.
28, 2007, the Norwegians began digging the Doomsday Vault in earnest.
We are building 3 vaults inside the mountains here in the permafrost, where the seeds are going to be stored. And then we have a tunnel, and we have a building in front, and we have a working space or a working area inside the mountains here.
Remote, cold, pristine. In one of these sandstone mountains, the Norwegians are building the seed bank. But it will be the Global Crop Diversity Trust, run by Carrie Fowler, that will maintain it forevermore.
A lot of people today are concerned about extinction, and we're going to end that process of extinction of agricultural crop varieties because we will have a safety backup, and it's going to be in a safe place.
The plan for the Doomsday Vault was inspired, in part, by a seed bank in a coal mine on Svalbard.
You're going into mine 3. There's a shaft of this mine that contains the Nordic Gene Bank backup collection, which they put here in 1984.
Now we proceed into the next door, and then we have the door into the gene bank just in front of us.
The Doomsday Vault is sited just 2 kilometres from Longyearbyen, the main town on Svalbard. Even at midnight in the summer, it's light, the streets deserted. The Norwegian government wanted to establish the seed vault because it is worried about the risk of extinction of the world's major crops.
Seeds is such an important part of the human heritage. We cannot allow seeds to be destroyed.
Most people are happy to rely on just a few major crops, such as rice or wheat, for their food. For some scientists, however, that's dangerous.
All of the wheat that they see in the field, in a particular field, is typically going to be the same and uniformly vulnerable to any new pest or disease that might come along. And there is, in fact, one coming along for wheat, a wheat stem rust virus, which is actually was the cause of plagues that are mentioned in the Bible. This is a terrible, terrible disease that it's also an experiment, what they call a 100-year experiment. They're testing the germination rate of the seeds here under permafrost conditions.
Only key in the world.
We have no mechanical refrigeration in this Nordic collection here, and the seeds have been just fine since 1984.
Peas.
More peas.
More peas.
This experiment is what enables us to know that the seed vault will be working quite well for decades, even if the mechanical refrigeration in the seed vault goes off.